learn so many good lecturer from you. And I think I also feel blessed and happy because the opportunity to become the moderator of this lecture, Prof.
Can we start? Is it we have to wait for something, or we can start now, Prof. Cheng? Or
we can start now. Yeah.
Okay, Dr. Alfian, please.
Good morning, everybody, all of the students, and of course our professor of physiology from University of Malaya, Professor Cheng Hwee Ming. Thank you for the opportunity and for the time about to present the lecture here, and also good morning also to Dr. Irfanuddin and Dr. Budi Santoso. So to shorten the time, I would like to give the times and place for Professor Hwee Ming Chin. Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Yeah. Okay, that's good. First of all, just to check the sound level, is it okay? The sound system, can you hear me clearly?
Yes.
Okay.
Prof, very clearly.
Yeah. So, good morning, colleagues and from Kuala Lumpur, and also students. Very pleased to be able to talk to you in hopefully a more informal way in introducing some insights and big picture. So in English, we sometimes use the word bird's eye view. We want to see the big picture. So now that we use drone, you could say we're going to look at the drone's view of renal physiology, which is a fairly complex system. It's convoluted, like part of the structure, convoluted. But what we're going to do this morning, in the time that we have, is just to give you big essential principles and concepts of renal physiology. I understand that you are perhaps already in the renal block, and but may not have done as much details. So I hope that the framework that I give you this morning will be able to be useful as you read yourself into the details of renal physiology. So I spoke to your seniors last year, the same topic, and the slides are basically the same. And this morning, it's my privilege to speak to all of you again in this new year, 2022. We hope that this will be a better year. That post-corona season will be with us soon. Okay, so let me share screen and then we will start. Okay. Can you see the slides?
Yes, Prof.
Yeah. Okay. Oh yeah. Sorry, that's good.
So we can see the slide.
Okay, you have a screen. So okay, so this is Sriwijaya, which I was privileged to be in Palembang for the first time in 2009, I think. So that's many years ago. So we're looking at the kidney and homeostasis. So if you want 1 or 2 line summary of what the kidneys are doing, obviously the kidneys are excreting metabolites as well as solutes that are non-essential for the body. But besides, more than just excretion, the kidneys are involved in homeostasis of the extracellular fluid. So this is perhaps a good summary of what the kidney is doing. And so this morning, we're going to look at various parameters that are maintained constant in the extracellular fluid. So we talk about balance. Balance, when you use the word homeostasis, we talk about balance. That's why my virtual background has this keyword, homeostasis. Yeah. So we're going to see what we mean by saying that the kidneys are very important in the homeostasis of the extracellular fluid. So next slide. So this is normally what I do, because in 1 hour or so, there is obviously a little time to answer too many questions. So I want to also tell the students that don't be in a hurry. Don't be in a hurry to try to copy notes. Just sit back and relax and take a few notes. But I will send this set of PowerPoint slides through Dr. Irfan, and you can have it as a reference. And these are my contact numbers in case you have further questions after this talk. So feel free to contact me. So this is a garden, very nice green garden near my department. So let's move on. So, okay, so this is a zoom in on the keyword homeostasis. So we're talking about control or regulation, which is a function of the kidney controlling and regulating several parameters in the extracellular fluid, more than just excreting waste products. And of course, we talk about balance. We'll be talking about several balance this morning. Water balance, for example, sodium balance. And then in any balance control, you need to maintain a certain level, an optimal level, which is carefully regulated. And of course, the concept of negative feedback in any homeostatic loop, okay, in any homeostatic loop. So I want to introduce in the next slide somebody that you should know, because he is the person who gave us the word homeostasis. So I think it's quite useful to be able to appreciate your historical heritage. So this is water cannon, spelled with 2 N. One N would remind you of the cat, of the Japanese camera. Yeah. So water cannon is the one who coined the word homeostasis, American physiologist. And this is one of his classic book called The Wisdom of the Body, meaning that the body is able to respond very discerningly in maintaining a constancy of the internal environment. By internal environment, we mean the fluid that surrounds all the cells in the body, which is the extracellular fluid. And water cannon is also the person that gave you the word fight or flight reaction in your autonomic sympathetic system. Okay. Now, this morning, as I also did last year with your seniors, some of your classmates are helping me to make this talk a bit more engaging. So they will come on at various points and present just a few minutes introduction to some of the key points in my talk. And the first point, as we've been trying to say here, is that the kidneys are very important in this essential function of the homeostasis of the extracellular fluid. So, so you will recognize them. So this is Atli and Latifa. So here they are. So it's a fun picture. So they will come and introduce the first point about the homeostatic overall function of the kidney. So let me stop sharing now and invite them to come on.
Thank you so much, Professor Cheng. We're going to present about the importance of kidney in the process of homeostasis. Hello, people. I'm your left bean-shaped organ.
Hi, and I'm your right bean-shaped organ.
Well, technically, we're not the red beans on your salad that you ate this morning.
Yeah, we're inside your body, just above your waist. So if you ever feel low back pain, it's actually us screaming and trying to tell you that we need more water.
Yeah, bro, seriously? You're hurting us when you drink a lot of water and do a lot, and when you drink a little water and do a lot of activities. Imagine we're supposed to excrete 1.5 liters of urine a day, but you don't give us enough water?
That's right. As a matter of fact, we're not just your excretory organs. We play vital roles in maintaining homeostasis of the extracellular fluid.
Yes, we are the most important organ in your body. We're masters of controlling, regulating, and maintaining a variety of parameters in your extracellular fluid.
Oh, left bean, don't be snobby. We're working together with other organs to maintain homeostasis, like with the circulatory system to filter blood.
You know your red blood cells, right? That's our products.
Okay, don't mislead them, please. We're not the ones who make it. We secrete the hormone to help others make it.
Okay. But we secrete renin to regulate blood pressure.
All right, I agree that we're important. So what should they do for us?
Just do us a favor. Don't drink soft drinks, sweet drinks, and caffeine too much. Those are disturbing our work in controlling the homeostasis in your body.
Yeah, that's totally right. And please don't separate left bean from me. It's really hard for me if I work alone. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Cheng and friends.
Okay, thank you, Atli and Latifa. So that's a very nice presentation, and this is the first time, one of the first few times I've seen a conversation between your left kidney and right kidney. So if you are creative, you can actually try to summarize some of the essential kidney knowledge into this kind of conversation. And if you have done this, I'll be happy to see your creation. But one of the points that is noted by in Atli and Latifa's presentation is that the kidney cooperate with other organs in order to maintain homeostasis. And we're going to see this towards the end where we talk about the cardiovascular system and the renal system, what we mean by cardio-renal function in maintaining blood volume and blood pressure. And there's a key hormone there, which is mentioned in the presentation. It is the hormone renin. Okay, so let me go back to my presentation, and things will get more complicated. We're making a slow start with some bit of entertainment. So let's move on. Okay, so I also call the wonderful kids Hwee. So this is a pun. Hwee or P refers to obviously urination. And so these are some of the major parameters that we'll be looking at today. One is osmoregulation. The other one is the control of the extracellular fluid volume. And this is linked to blood volume because blood volume is part of extracellular fluid volume. And so by controlling blood volume, you also control the blood pressure, okay? And pH is of the extracellular fluid is very important. We'll look at that in just a few slides at the end of this talk. And we'll definitely be talking about sodium physiology as well as potassium physiology. And of course, this is popular common knowledge that the kidneys reabsorb all the essential solutes that are filtered. So the non-essentials are secreted and excreted, but the essentials like glucose and amino acid, 100% is reabsorbed by the kidney. And they're both reabsorbed by secondary active transport at the proximal tubule. So some of these you may have already done. So these are some of the major points. So I'd like to invite two more of your classmates. This is Nashwa and Zara, who will start by talking about osmoregulation. Now, osmoregulation is also linked to something known as water balance. So we're interested in balances this morning, control of water balance, control of sodium balance, and potassium balance. So these are the three main points we will look at in more detail. So let me show you your classmate, Nashwa and Zara, and they will tell us about osmoregulation or control of water balance. So here they are. So they've all been dressed up in the same way. So please welcome them now.
Whew. I feel like I'm in the middle of the Sahara, Zara.
Gosh, Nana, you look spent.
I rather am. I think I need to drink more water.
You should. By doing this, did you know that kidneys are essential in water balance?
Interesting. I have just heard of this. Perhaps you can elaborate further.
Okay, before that, can you tell me what is water
Of
balance?
course, water balance is the concept that the amount of water lost from the body is equal to the amount of water consumed.
Right, you see, when you are dehydrated or in negative water balance, the kidneys will reabsorb more water.
I see. That means it would also work in reverse. By being in an overhydrated state or in positive water balance, our kidney will excrete more urine
Sounds
than
about right,
usual.
Nanas.
Then Zara, perhaps you know that the water balance is controlled by the kidneys are also related to the kidney's role in osmoregulation.
Just sort of that. Thanks for the information. So, do you know what will happen if our kidneys lose their function?
Yes, now I understand that when our kidneys fail, waste and extra fluids can build up in our blood and makes us sick.
Stop working, our body will fail to maintain the homeostasis.
And that is the end of our presentation, but don't worry, Prof. Cheng will explain to you in more detail soon.
Thank you. Notice your classmates they have used the kidney, and I noticed the rhyme. The first phrase is Sahara Zara. Actually, I think that's intention. Yeah, Sahara Zara. Now I will always remember Sahara Zara as kidney involved with water balance. So so we're going to continue now in more details, and this is one of the most complex area of renal physiology, the control of water balance. And I'll explain in a short while. Now, let me share screen. Okay, so so this is GFR, glomerular filtration rate, is the first step in what is known as the renal handling, or how does a kidney process the plasma, which is filtered. Now, this value is always given as a reference value, and this may not mean very much. And in fact, it just adds on to the many values that you have to remember. But in order to impress you, if you convert this to per day, 1 to 5 ml per minute, you multiply by 60 per minute per hour, then multiply by 24 hours, it gives you a very huge value. This is 180 liters per day. Because we are in a virtual lecture, I can't do this. But normally when I say this, I would get my students to respond by saying, wow, because it's a huge value, 180 liters per day. Because if you think about the standard reference person, 70 kilogram male adult, the extracellular fluid is about 14 liters, 1/4. So this tells you that the first step in renal function is to filter more than 10 times, almost 13 to 15 times the total volume of the ECF. So again, this highlights what we said at the beginning, that one of the summary statement about the kidney is that it is involved in the homeostasis of the extracellular fluid. So more than 10 times of the total ECF volume is processed in this first step of urine formation, which is the glomerular filtration rate. And as you heard in the first slide, first presentation by Atli and Latifa, what comes out in your washroom, the toilet, is only about 1.5 liters per day. Okay, you filter 180 liters per day, you produce in the toilet roughly 1.5 liters per day. So this tells you straight away that most of the 180 liters are reabsorbed back, recycled back. Water is a very essential parameter to be recovered. So if you produce 2 liters per day in the toilet, that means 78 liters per day are reabsorbed. So this tells you another very important function of the renal tubules or the renal nephrons. Okay, So more than 99%, about 99% of the GFR is produced as the urine volume, V dot here, okay, V dot here. So now, so how does the kidney reabsorb and recover the water? And this is where we come into a renal mechanism, which normally takes at least 30 minutes to explain. And now with the video and the YouTube channel, you can always view it in an animated form. But let me just show you what I mean when I say this. So this looks like a red bean. It could be the left or the right kidney. But anyway, so this shows you a very unusual characteristic of the kidney. And that is, you notice the numbers increases to about 1,002 or 1,003 in some textbook. So this is the osmolarity in different parts of the kidney, from the cortex running down to the inner medulla. And so very unusual for the kidney, and I don't think you see this in any parts of the body. There is an increasing layer of a higher osmolarity. So this is like strata or layering of increasing osmolarity. So that's why the whole process is called sometimes osmotic stratification, okay, up to about 1,002, 1,003. And so to just shorten what this one here, although it's not a single value, we sometimes call this area a hyperosmotic renal interstitium. Hyperosmotic renal interstitium is not one single value, but an increasing value of osmolarity. Now, the reason why this is important is because water only moves efficiently when there's an osmotic gradient. Okay, and this obviously goes through the aquaporins. So when we talk about the need to recover water by the kidney, you must have a prepared osmotic gradient. And this is a function of this high hyperosmotic interstitium. So the collecting duct, which is not shown here, passes through this high region, so that if you are in negative water balance, like the presentation by Zara and Nashua, then you need to recover more water. So already there is a prepared osmotic gradient, and then the what you call it, the collecting duct can become permeable by having more aquaporins. And this is a function of that hormone called vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone. Okay, so so a lot of details about this mechanism called the renal countercurrent mechanism, which we are not going to look at. But the main point of the renal countercurrent is to establish this high, in order that when you need to recover more water during negative water balance, there is already an established prepared osmotic gradient. Okay, so this is what happens. Now, sometimes as the student presented, you have excess water in the body. So we call this positive water balance. So in this case, obviously, more water is excreted by the kidney. So let me show you what happens in this case, okay? So if you drink excess water, either voluntarily because for some reason, this was recommended to you, whether it actually works, we don't know. So if you drink excess water, you are overhydrated or in positive water balance. And so the positive water balance means that your osmolarity will be diluted, so you have a decrease in osmolarity. Okay, so there's a link between water balance and osmoregulation. Positive water balance, low osmolarity. Negative water balance, high osmolarity. So when these changes in osmolarity are then detected by osmoreceptors found in the brain, in the hypothalamus. Okay, so in this case, because the osmolarity dropped in positive water balance, you have an inhibition of this key hormone called ADH, antidiuretic hormone, or vasopressin. And so less ADH, which means that the collecting duct remains impermeable. Remember this diagram here? So the collecting duct passes through this area. So if the collecting duct remains impermeable, then the balance of the fluid from GFR is a long journey that reaches the collecting duct. Most of that is just excreted. So you can have obviously more than your 2 liters of water per day. Okay, so this is in response to positive water balance, where ADH is suppressed and more water is excreted. Okay, so this is osmoregulation and also control of water balance. Actually means the same thing. Now the next slide put in a bit more detail that ADH is not only affected by osmolarity, it is also affected by volume changes. And you think about it, every time you exercise and are dehydrated, not only does your osmolarity increase, but your volume also decreases, right? And so the change in the volume can also provide a second stimulus to increase vasopressin. This is the next slide. Okay, so here you are. So in this case, this is just a drop in the volume. Okay, there is no change in the osmolarity. So, but in this case, you can have increased vasopressin, and this actually obviously must involve volume receptors. If the osmolarity change, we talk about osmoreceptors. In this case, if the volume change, we talk about volume receptors. Now, I'm not sure whether you've done this. There are 2 sets of volume sensors in the body. One at the bottom here in red. One in the high pressure, meaning the arterial side. That's the high pressure side of the circulation. And here actually we're talking about the baroreceptors. Baroreceptors, you think about receptors that senses pressure. But volume changes is linked to pressure changes. So when the volume drops, the baroreceptors obviously senses a drop in the pressure. Okay, so now the low pressure volume sensors are found in the low pressure side of the systemic circulation, and that will be in the venous side as well as in the cardiac chambers. I'm not sure whether you've done this, and also you can add on in the pulmonary circulation. So these volume sensors, considered as a low pressure volume sensors, are also detecting the change, contribute to sending efferent impulses when the volume drops. This can also increase vasopressin. So this makes sense, right? Because you want to recover the volume that has decreased, even though in this case, the osmolarity may not have changed. So think of an example where if you generously and regularly donate blood, you don't change the osmolarity, you only change the volume. Okay, so in that situation, you can also have the action of ADH in order to recover more water. Okay, now just a few more slides on water balance. Let's see what I have. Okay, so this is a fair. I show this slide. I would tell the student, please fasten your seat belts because there's a lot of information there. As I said, this set of slides will be available to you. Just wanted to highlight one other point about water balance. So besides the ADH, which is affected by both osmolarity and volume, there's another group of neurons also found in the hypothalamus, which obviously is involved in helping to the balance. This is obviously the thirst mechanism. So as long as you are still conscious, if you are dehydrated, you feel more thirsty, right? And so this tells you that both osmolarity changes as well as volume changes can also contribute to an increased stimulation of what is known as the thirst center. These are specialized group of neurons that can detect changes in volume as well as changes in osmolarity. Okay, and this is the flow diagram for you. Okay, so at this point, I think that I want to call upon. Okay, so we move on to the third parameter that we want to look at, and this is now sodium balance. Okay, sodium balance. And so let's welcome now Regina and Hisham, who will introduce in a few minutes certain major concept about how the kidney function to regulate sodium physiology. So let's welcome them now as I stop sharing.
Thank you, Professor Cheng, for the opportunity. We will present about sodium balance. Hi, sorry I'm late. Did I miss anything?
Actually, you missed the first part of the lecture. What happened? Are you okay?
Not really. I feel so dizzy and weak right now.
Why? Did you eat or drink something bad?
No, I think it's because I just donate my blood.
Well, in that case, it's common to feel that way because I think you have a negative sodium balance resulting in you getting a headache. And from what I've learned, sweating can also lead to the same effect. Oh, and do you know that your kidneys are actually the organ that play a huge part to keep your sodium balance? And one more thing, sodium is the most abundant solid in extracellular fluid.
I get it. And since sodium balance affects blood volume, this also indicates that the control of sodium balance is also linked to the control of blood pressure by the kidneys.
Exactly. And I think you should drink isotonic water to help you with the problem because isotonic water can maintain your sodium balance.
All right. Thanks for the advice. We should head to our next class. I heard we're going to learn more about this.
Yeah, Professor Cheng will explain more about the sodium balance after this.
Okay, thank you, Regina and Isham, for that very nice and brief introduction to sodium physiology. So now sodium physiology is just as complex and interesting. Okay, when you say something is complex in physiology, it doesn't mean that it's difficult. It's just complex, and I hope that you will appreciate that some of the complexity highlights the design and order in the physiology control. So let me now go over some of the interesting understanding of sodium physiology. Now, this is one of my favorite cartoon, and occasionally you see some physiology in this cartoon, and so you can read this for yourself. And so in this case, it is a case of hyponatremia, and Snoopy here offers a little salt of water. Now, I will leave you to decide whether the physiology here is correct, okay? So, but it doesn't matter. The fun and the humor is there. Now, I want to say at this stage that there is a difference between two sodium parameters. One is sodium concentration, and the other one is sodium balance. The two things does not mean the same thing, okay? So what I'm saying here is that the kidney controls sodium concentration, and the kidneys also regulate sodium balance. And the kidneys uses different mechanism to control sodium concentration and different mechanism to regulate sodium balance. Now let's see what we mean by this, okay? So next slide, yeah. So next slide is, so here we are, the two kidneys are also talking here, like your right and left kidney. So obviously one of the main functions is to concentrate and produce concentrated urine. And this is obviously part of water balance, okay? Now, you're wondering why this triangle is here. You will recognize osmolality here, water here, and the sodium here in a box is sodium concentration. Now, in recent years, we have used this kind of diagram to summarize small pieces of information so that the students can hopefully visualize and help them in their conceptualizing of physiology. So here is a combination of physiology and geometry. There's a triangle here. We've called this Phi geometric diagram. So in this Phi geometric diagram, you have osmoregulation, OSM. You have control of water balance, which obviously means the same thing as we saw in the last presentation. And now I want to introduce the third parameter, and that is when you say osmoregulation and control of water balance, you are actually saying control of sodium concentration. It means the same thing. Let me give you an example. If you are in positive water balance, your osmolarity decreases, and so does your sodium concentration. So by osmoregulating, you normalize the osmolarity, you restore the water balance, you also restore the sodium concentration. And this is why I put the coffee 3-in-1 here, because these three parameters means the same thing. Sodium concentration control, water balance, as osmolarity control. Okay. Now, when we look at the, and obviously this is under, you can put the hormone here. All these three are controlled by A, D, H, or vasopressin. Okay. Now we move on to the more complex matter of sodium balance control. Now, sodium balance means the total amount of sodium, and most of that is in the extracellular fluid. Now, this involves, as the first group of students, Atli and Latifa presented, it involves a hormone called renin. Okay, renin, which is part of controlling sodium balance. Let's see what we mean by this. Okay, now, not sure how much of renal physiology you have done, but this is in almost font size 44, 48. This is a very important conceptual statement for you to think about, and that is when you control ECF volume, and this also means blood volume, because blood volume is part of ECF volume. When you control blood volume or ECF volume, you do this by involving the kidney, and this involves changing the amount of sodium that is excreted in the urine. And the reason is because your ECF volume is dependent on what is known as sodium balance, total amount of sodium in the body. So for example, if you have a lower ECF volume, it means that you are in negative sodium balance. I don't know whether you were entertained and may not have seen the presentation of the group of students. Negative sodium balance always occurs when you lose body fluid, because all the body fluid contains sodium. Okay, so when you want to restore body fluid, you always need to restore the sodium. This is the concept. And if you want to restore sodium, then you look at this relationship. This is excreted sodium is equal to the filtered sodium minus the reabsorbed sodium. So back again, if you, let's say, donate blood, which is obviously you're losing body fluid, you are in negative sodium balance. And so you will find that your kidney will try to restore the sodium and you will excrete less sodium. If you want to excrete less sodium, it will mean that you will filter less sodium and reabsorb more sodium. Okay, so this always happens. Okay, so this is the major key concept to understanding how the kidney, so in other words, the amount of sodium that you excrete in the urine is not random. It is in response to whether you are in negative or positive sodium balance. It is a homeostatic process, the amount of sodium that you excrete in your urine. So that's why I tell students that when you pee or you wee, when you go to the washroom, you are performing homeostatic work. It is not just excretion. Okay, you are responding to your sodium balance. And so I just want to highlight the key hormone which is involved in reabsorbing sodium when you need to decrease sodium excretion in the urine. Okay, and this is a hormone renin. And I understand from the students that you have done this hormone, and so this is not unfamiliar ground. So this is just to show you one location, specific location in the collecting duct where sodium reabsorption is involved. And this is obviously under the key hormone aldosterone. This is the tubular fluid side. This is the interstitial fluid. And this is obviously the peritubular capillary. So when you need to reabsorb more sodium, it's a two-step phenomena. First step across sodium channel. Second step is an active process involving the ubiquitous or the universal sodium potassium ATPase. And so the key hormone aldosterone stimulates or increases the sodium channel as well as the activity of the sodium potassium ATPase. And so overall, aldosterone always increases this unidirectional transport, which is called reabsorption of sodium. Okay. Now, aldosterone obviously comes from renin. I think you know this. Renin produces A1, and then A1 produces A2, and then A2 then stimulates aldosterone from the adrenal cortex, and then aldosterone circulates in the blood, enters the interstitial fluid, goes into the cell, it's a steroid hormone, and activates the mechanism for increasing sodium channel as well as the ATPase. Okay. So now I just want to summarize here that in understanding the renin-angiotensin system, this key hormone, which is a renal hormone, so the kidney is part of the endocrine system. As the first group of students, talks about, although they didn't mention the hormone, the kidney also produces erythropoietin for your red cell formation. The kidney, obviously, in our discussion now, produces renin, which is important in sodium balance. So I think the next slide, again, is a bit complex because renin is always secreted when you want to conserve sodium. Let me repeat this. Renin is always secreted when you want to respond to negative sodium balance. And there are actually three pathways whereby renin secretion is either increased or decreased. Okay. So in negative sodium balance, or when you lose body fluid, all these three pathways for renin secretion will be triggered or stimulated. And this is the renin pathway. So fasten your seatbelt. I think that's a slide. I can't see ahead of me. There you are. Okay. So now I want you to don't look at the middle first. Okay, just look at what is at the top, the green. So this is decreased blood volume or decreased plasma volume. So if I ask you, and I could interact with you more, this is a physical class. If you have hypovolemia, in terms of sodium balance, what would this be? Obviously, this would be negative sodium balance, right? Now look at what happens at the yellow part right at the end. So you always respond in that way. So the kidney responds to negative sodium balance by decreasing sodium excretion because you want to conserve the sodium. By conserving the sodium, you will eventually recover the ECF volume. How do you recover sodium? Again, we go backwards. You need aldosterone. If you need aldosterone, you need angiotensin 2 that will stimulate adrenal cortex. And angiotensin 2 obviously comes from the hormone renin. Okay, go to the tree or simultaneously stimulated whenever your volume or your sodium balance becomes negative. The first pathway, you can write this down, is RSN. This is renal sympathetic nerve. Okay, renal sympathetic nerve. Now, this is because every time you have a drop in the volume, you activate, I think you know this quite well, the barrel reflex. The barrel reflex increases sympathetic activity, but when you say increase sympathetic activity, it also means the renal sympathetic activity. And so the renal sympathetic activity will, as a result of the barrel reflex, will stimulate the secretion of renin. This is the first pathway. Now, the second pathway is through a structure which I think you probably know. This is not McDonald. This is Macula Densa. Okay, so every time you have a drop in the volume, and the details we won't have the time to describe here, you will also cause the macula densa to stimulate paracrine. Macula densa is in the distal tubule. It stimulates the paracrine that will stimulate the JG cell, juxtaglomerular cells at the efferent arteriole to increase renin. Okay, so this is happening at the same time. Increase renin by renal sympathetic nerve, increase renin by the paracrine from the macula densa, and then on top of that, there's a third pathway, which is through the change in the RPP. RPP is just renal perfusion pressure, arterial pressure. So this makes sense because every time your blood volume drops, your blood pressure drops, and this also means that the blood pressure that drives the blood flow, called the renal perfusion pressure, also drops. Now, within the kidney is a group of volume sensors. We call them the intrarenal, because this is in the kidney, intrarenal baroreceptor, because they sense the drop in the pressure, which has happened as a result of the drop in the volume. Okay, so this intrarenal baroreceptor also contributes together with the renal sympathetic nerve and the paracrine from the macula densa. And so there is a very potent, strong stimuli for renin secretion. Okay, so respond to negative sodium balance or volume, drop in the volume. Okay. Now the next slide, before we move on to the next parameter, you enjoy English pun. I do this all the time. So this sounds like your Corona slogan, right? Sanitizers and social distancing. Now the kidneys actually are salinizers. Saline is just sodium chloride. And of course, in any negative sodium situation, the kidney will absorb more sodium. And this is always together with chloride. And in any positive sodium balance, the kidney will obviously excrete more sodium in the urine. Okay, it removes sodium. So this is just for those who appreciate some English humor. So I'll leave this for you. This is a song that I showed last year to your seniors. You can sing this to the tune of the common folk song that is shared by Indonesia and Malaysia. And you may recognize that this is a song, Rasa Sayang. So the sodium physiology here is written to your song, Rasa Sayang. Okay, so now this is a nice summary slide, one of my favorite slides. To give you a real life situation, now I think you can delete the word severe. You don't have to have severe in order for all this to be true. If you sweat, so far we've done the water balance and then the sodium balance. Okay, so if you sweat, you enter into both negative water balance and negative sodium balance. Okay, let me summarize and just highlight what the students have also tried to present. Obviously, when you sweat, so your osmolarity becomes higher. You are dehydrated. So again, there's a link here. Negative water balance means high osmolarity. Now, going back to the triangle, the Hwee geometric triangle, what does this mean for sodium concentration? Negative water balance, high osmolarity, and sodium concentration, if you write the word here, will be the triangle. And so the major key hormone here is vasopressin. It responds to the osmolarity, which also means that it is responding to the hypernatremia. And so you get conservation of water. Now, as you have just described in the last few slides, if you lose body fluid, and in this case it is the sweat, you enter into negative sodium balance. Okay, and if you want to recover your body fluid, you have to recover the sodium which has been lost. And right at the bottom here in yellow is decreased sodium excretion in the urine. And this obviously involves this major hormone here, aldosterone, which increases reabsorption. And of course, you also have, which we don't have time to elaborate, a decrease in the filtered sodium. Now, obviously here, between the volume, drop in the volume, negative sodium balance, and increase in aldosterone, you have the three pathways for the stimulation of the renin secretion. Renal sympathetic nerve, macula densa pathway, and the intrarenal baroreceptor. So I hope this framework helps you to conceptualize in the big picture, and you can use this as you read about the finer details. Now we have one other major control system, and here I would like to invite Fahira and Eki, your classmates, who will tell us a little bit about potassium balance now. Okay, so we have water balance, we have sodium balance, And now we move into a very essential role of the kidney, and this is potassium balance. This is because whenever you have renal problem, very likely higher. And this is dangerous for the heart because hyperkalemia can actually stop the heart from beating. Okay, so let's welcome, as I show you the picture. Sorry, this is not Fahira or Eki. This is just to give you a picture of our friend here, his full name, because we talk about loop of Henle so much in renal physiology. I think the next, here we are. This is Fahira and Eki, who will now tell us something about potassium balance in renal physiology. Please welcome them.
Hey, what's up, Eki?
Hey, what's up? I'm good. How about you?
I'm feeling good too. Hey, I have a question.
Yeah, what question?
What do you know about potassium? Can you explain to me a little bit more?
Sure. So, from what I've learned, in our body, potassium is
Okay.
in fact, it is one of the most abundant ions together with sodium, in which located inside our body cells, with the approximate amount of 140 milliequivalents per liter.
Wow, that's new knowledge for me. But what kind of role it has in our body?
Well, potassium has a main role in neurons' action potential, as well as muscles.
Okay. By the way, you've mentioned that it is regulated by kidneys?
Yes.
How?
So our kidneys regulate the potassium concentration in the ECF, extracellular fluid, by secreting and excreting the excess amount of potassium we consume.
I see. Do you know where can we find this mineral?
Well, if you're talking about foods, of course, you can find in a lot of foods we usually consume on a daily basis. Like as you can see here, you get fish like salmon, tomatoes, spinach, mushroom, milk, yogurt, and more.
Okay. Oh, Eki, I have one more question to ask you. Is there any signal in which makes our kidneys do their function in secreting potassium?
There is a hormone we call aldosterone.
Aldosterone?
Yeah. ALDOSTERone.
I see. Now I understand. Thanks a lot, by the way, for the explanation. Okay, actually, I've got to go now. My grandma just called me. See you next time.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Fahira and Eki. I like that potassium joke. It's called potassium. Yeah. That's I've never heard that before. So thank you for that introduction. So in just a few slides, because we don't have a lot of time, just to give you the gist of the importance of control of potassium, importance of pH regulation by the kidney in a couple of slides. So let me just go back to my slides. Okay, so we've done sodium physiology, and the relationship, as I showed you, is excreted sodium is filtered sodium minus reabsorbed sodium by the nephrons. Now, in potassium physiology, this is the same. You have excreted potassium in the urine is equal to the filtered minus the reabsorbed. And this is the important point, that in controlling potassium level in the blood, in the ECF, you need this very important component, which is the renal tubule, and that is the secretion of potassium. And the simple reason for that is that the extracellular potassium is a very low level, only 4 to 5 millimole. And every day, whatever food you eat, and you saw a lot of food, shown by the students, you always add in after a meal excess potassium into the body. And so one of the most important functions of the kidney is to secrete the excess potassium that enters your body. In any normal diet, you add in excess potassium. Okay, so that is why, as I said, every time you have renal problem, the risk of this secretory function being suboptimal or abnormal becomes very real. And so potassium will tend to increase in your blood. Okay, so the next slide is just a big picture of potassium handling by the kidney. Kidney is right at the bottom here. So the numbers are not for you to memorize. This is just to show you the relative proportion. So most of the potassium is obviously inside your cells. Potassium is the major electrolyte or cation inside the cells. This is the extracellular fluid. So what we want to maintain and control the homeostasis of the ECF is this very low concentration of potassium. Okay? So on a normal diet, again, these are rough values, you find that roughly 100 millimole of potassium enters the body. And this is obviously in excess of the total amount of potassium in the body fluid. So immediately after a meal, most of that is reabsorbed. Some is not absorbed, lost in the feces. Now, in order to maintain a low extracellular potassium concentration, most of this has to be removed, secreted, and excreted. And you see the number here, 90 here and 90 there. And this is the role of, as I said, the secretory function of the kidney. Okay. So again, the student mentioned that this same hormone does several things in the body. One is obviously the reabsorption of sodium. The same hormone acts on the same collecting ductal cells in order to secrete potassium into the tubular fluid to be excreted. Okay, so this is the role of the hormone aldosterone. So let me show you a very rapid response system. So if you take in excess potassium, now this doesn't have to be an intentional looking for potassium-rich diet. Any diet, any meal, you are adding in excess potassium. And so the increase in potassium will immediately stimulate the release. This is a direct effect in secreting aldosterone. Aldosterone acts on the principal cell of the collecting duct to secrete and excrete potassium. So you see, this is a very rapid response mechanism. Whereas for the sodium, you have renin, angiotensin 1, angiotensin 2, and all that. And this is because you need to maintain this value very carefully. It's a very low value. Now, I always show this slide and ask a question without giving my audience the answer, whether it is my own student, to give you something to think about. Okay, in any homeostatic control, you obviously have this feedback regulation. So in osmoregulation, you have osmoreceptor. So now when we talk about potassium regulation, you must have potassium sensors or receptors. So my question for you to think about, and I'm happy to hear from you, you can text me the answer. Where do you think are the potassium receptors or sensors located in this homeostatic loop? Okay, something for you to think about this before you Google. You may or may not find this actually in Google. Where do you think would the potassium sensors be located that detects the changes in potassium and influence the aldosterone secretion? Okay, so the next slide is just a restaurant slide, I think. Okay, this is a restaurant from my hometown taken many years ago. It's got a very funny name, very okay restaurant. Yeah, so when I saw this, I noticed the word K here. So this reminds me of potassium physiology. So any meal, of course, the more you eat, the more potassium you are loading your body. And it's okay because the control of potassium is very rapid by the hormone aldosterone. Okay, so now I will finish with just a few slides on the pH function. You may or may not have done this already. In the pH regulation of the ECF, and most of your acid load that enters the body is from metabolism. And the acid load is divided into two main acid load. Most of the acid load is in the form of carbonic acid. And this is obviously not a problem because as long as your lungs are functioning well, you will remove most of the carbonic acid load. Now, there's a much smaller fraction, HA here, also called the non-carbonic acid load. And the main point here is that the non-carbonic acid load can only be removed or handled by the kidney. So that if you have renal problem and this non-carbonic acid accumulates, you will obviously enter into acidosis. So again, in most renal problem, in that you have the potential problem of a metabolic acidosis. And we do not have the time in this lecture to cover about the detailed mechanism of the renal function to maintain pH by excreting the proton as well as recovering the bicarbonate. Okay, so and this picture here tells you that the kidney collaborates with the lungs in pH control. In the previous slide, we are making the point, as the student mentioned, that the kidneys collaborates with the heart and the baroreflex in maintaining blood volume and blood pressure. So I leave you with one of my favorite slides. And this is, again, you see the kidney collaborates with the lung in maintaining blood pH. Because one of the most important chemical buffer in the body is the bicarbonate carbonic acid buffer, which is linked to the partial pressure of CO2. Okay, and so this integrated system is able to regulate both the bicarbonate component and the carbonic acid component. And this, the ratio of these two is the main factor that the pH of the ECF is dependent on. So if you keep this in mind, as you do pH balance, it will help you to appreciate how sometimes you have respiratory compensation or sometimes you have renal compensation for any acid-base imbalance. Okay? So with that, I think I will end with this slide. Do not lose your homeostatic balance. The kidney is right in the middle here, and the kidney also has some function together with the intestine. For example, in the control of calcium, homeostasis, and so on. Okay, so this is my my focus always as I talk to students to get you to beyond just memorizing physiology. You actually need to think big, think conceptually, and hopefully that will help you to meander through any complexity in physiology. Thank you very much for listening, and I thank the students again, the 8 students who have helped me to hopefully engage you more in this talk. Thank you very much.
Much. Now we go to the question session, Prof.
Sure.
From us, we want to give. If you want to judge the question, we want to you to give the best question. We want our Dr. Irfanuddin.
I see. Okay, you want to give a prize for
prize?
Okay,
Yes,
fine. Yeah. So just a simple question. What is the concentration of potassium in ECF? What is the concentration of potassium in the extracellular fluid?
Ayo, siapa yang bisa jawab? Come on.
Rana Nabila Putri.
Ya, silakan, Prof.
Thank you, Professor and Doctor, for the opportunity. From what I have taken note of, I think it's around 65 milli equivalent of potassium.
Do you say 55? Yeah, here 55.
65, Professor.
65, huh? Talking about the total amount. What about the concentration? Yeah. The slide says 65. I wonder concentration in millimole per liter.
Okay, Adelita Diva Adora.
Yes, Prof. I think the concentration of potassium in the extracellular fluid is about 3.5 until 5 milli equivalent per liter.
Yeah, okay, it's a very low value. That's correct, Adelita. Is about the range is about 3.5 to 5. Yeah, so we normally say about 4. Yeah, that's a very low concentration that needs to be maintained. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, Prof. Maybe our student maybe want to ask a question.
Sure.
So time to Prof. Cheng. Okay, the first question from Judith Emanuela.
To introduce myself, my name is Judith Emanuel, and I have a question. Previously, Professor Cheng has mentioned about the importance of water balance and sodium balance in the body. He has also, when there's an increased uptake in water, there's also an increased uptake in water secretion in the urine. Now, I assume the body takes sodium from outside, like from our dietary intakes. I also know that an increased sodium in dietary intake leads to hypertension. Does this mean that since there's also a sodium balance in the body, does this mean that people with hypertension secretes more sodium in their urine? That's all for me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Judith. Yeah, so there is some link, obviously, between sodium level in the diet and the maintenance of blood pressure. And this is obviously through the link that we've tried to associate, and that is the total body sodium is associated with your ECF volume and also blood volume. And blood volume changes obviously affects blood pressure. But for those with hypertension, is not as simple as that, because this we will do in your clinical program. We talk about salt sensitive individual, and of course, meaning that in some individual there seems to be a more sensitivity to sodium effect in raising maybe the blood volume, blood pressure. Not all. It's not as simple as that. So, but the general concept is that the total body sodium does affect the blood volume. Yeah. So, and of course, in the normal person, If you are in negative sodium balance, you tend to recover more sodium. If you are in positive sodium balance, the kidney will always reabsorb less in order to excrete more sodium. Yeah. But in terms of the direct link between sodium and hypertension, there are some genetic factors. Maybe that's why some individuals are known as salt sensitive individuals. Yeah. I hope that answers your question, Judith.
Okay. Next question. Ayo, silakan, Dek. Oke, Pana Nabila Putri.
Okay, before I start, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Rana Nabila Putri. First, you've given us the chance to ask ourselves in the middle of the presentation. Is it true that the potassium receptors are located in the principal cells? Or if it is not, maybe you can give us a little explanation about the receptors.
Yeah, okay. Right. Thank you, Rana or Nabila, for attempting that question. Yeah, I asked the question. Some of my favorite question to my own students. Where are the potassium sensors or receptors? So one suggestion by Rana is that it is at the principal cell. So let me say that the receptors that are linked to this homeostatic rapid control of potassium, they are not at the principal cells. They're somewhere else. So I don't want to I call this take away the joy of discovery. So I won't tell you the answers, but it's not at the principal cells. Yeah.
Okay, Professor, thank you for your explanation.
Yeah. Thank you for trying. That's good. Yeah.
Okay, maybe another question from the. Ayo, siapa lagi deh yang mau bertanya? Oke, Vito Ananta.
Hi, Vito.
Good morning, Professor Cheng.
Hi, Vito.
Hi, and my name is Vito Ananta from the Delta class, and I would like to ask you a question. We were just discussing about the renal homeostasis, including renal autoregulation, but we spoke a little bit about vasopressin, the ADH hormone, and this is actually related to our tutorial this week, Prof. Our problem-based learning about diuretics, drugs, and how it affects our renal function. Thank you, Prof.
So, sorry, Vito, what is your question?
I'm actually about diuretics on how it affect our renal function?
Oh, this will take at least half an hour.
just a little bit. It's okay.
Yeah, no, yeah. So diuretics obviously causes diuresis. Okay. So in terms of ADH, the ADH is anti-diuretic hormone. The other name is vasopressin. So there are two types of diuresis. Quickly, one is called water diuresis. The other one is called osmotic diuresis. Okay, water diuresis is produced when you inhibit ADH action. This is one possible way of producing diuresis. Okay. The other form of diuresis is caused by having unreabsorbed solute and mainly sodium in the tubular fluid. So you find in your pharmacology lecture that a lot of the diuretics act by inhibiting sodium reabsorption, because when sodium remains in the tubular fluid, it becomes an osmoactive particle. So like the loop diuretic or the even inhibition of aldosterone have the same pattern in increasing the sodium in the tubular fluid. So when you inhibit sodium reabsorption, whether it is at the loop, whether distal tubule, or whether it's at the collecting duct by inhibiting channel, you produce effectively an osmotic diuresis. Yeah. So this is my very brief summary of. I hope that helps you, Vito.
Yeah, that's how I think everything's gonna help. Thank you so much, Prof.
Okay, right.
Anybody want to give another question?
So the 8 students, they have a virtual background. Is kidney one? What is the word down there? Gang, is it? Is it gang? I can't really read it. Is it kidney gang? What is there a word under the kidney?
Prof, this is from Adil. Adil want to ask the question. Adil Cahyagu.
Hi, Prof. Morning. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I just want to ask you a question between, is there any relation between the disturbance of sodium balance and edema?
Yeah, there is some relationship, but it's not direct. Okay, let's give an example. If you have, let's say, this hyper secretion of aldosterone, so obviously your sodium reabsorption is abnormally increased, so your ECF volume can expand. But whether when you increase your ECF volume in that way, you actually get edema, may not be. So as far as I know, you get increased aldosterone and obviously increased sodium balance and enlargement of the ECF. Generally, you may not necessarily get edema because of something known as, I don't know whether you heard of the word aldosterone escape. Have you heard of this word? Aldosterone escape? Adli, I'm asking you.
What, bro?
Have you heard of this mechanism called aldosterone escape?
No, I haven't heard of it.
Okay, now just take this down. Maybe you can Google for it. Yeah. So it's not may not necessarily produce edema if you have increased aldosterone. Yeah. But if you have cardiac failure, and then because cardiac failure, you have poor blood flow to the kidney, that activates renin. In that kind of situation, you do get edema. Yeah. So that means there is no aldosterone escape phenomenon. Yeah. So I leave that to you to read about aldosterone escape.
Thank you so much, bro.
Okay. Maybe anybody want to give a question? Okay, next question is from Akhtar
Thank you
Fatifarizon.
for the opportunity. My name is Akhtar Fatifarizon from Delta. I have some question. Doctor says the kidney work as a sanitizer that reabsorbs the sodium chloride. Are there other compounds that are reabsorbed?
So, sorry, if I hear you correctly, are there other solutes
Yes.
that are reabsorbed by the kidney?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course, we are only looking at a few main parameters. There are many solutes which are essential that are also reabsorbed by the kidney, obviously glucose, amino acid, but there may be other solutes that are also reabsorbed. Yeah. The non-essential ones, like in drug metabolism or in the chemicals that are found in any of your preserved food, preservative, or that, those that are metabolized and needs to be removed. Yeah. So the general concept is that the essential solutes are filtered and reabsorbed, and sodium and chloride are obviously one of the most essential solutes that need to be recovered. I don't know whether I answer your question.
Okay, Akhtar. So is it answer question?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, maybe another question. Oke, apa ada lagi, Dek, yang ingin bertanya? Silakan. Oke. Nggak ada lagi ya?
Kayaknya nggak ada, Dok.
Okay, Prof. I think the question session is done.
Okay.
Maybe from the student, which is the best question, Prof. So they can get the prize.
Yeah. So generally in a big group, yeah, it's not easy for students to ask questions. But as I said, be happy to interact with the students. I will send my PowerPoint slides, and feel free to contact me if you have any questions. And if you have thought about the question, the answer to my question, where are the potassium sensors? Be happy to hear from you. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much to Professor Hwee Ming Cheng. So for the lecture, we gain so much knowledge. So I give the time and place to Dr. Irfanuddin.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Cheng, for your participation, for your insightful knowledge to our students. By the way, Dr. Alfian, do we have recognized one of the students that have the prize?
Yeah. Maybe Prof. Cheng
Prof.
yang
Cheng, please select one of our student that
Yeah,
one of the student that
I can't remember her name. Yeah, she answered the potassium concentration question.
answer concentration. Siapa yang menjawab concentration tadi?
3.5 to 5. Yeah.
Saya dokter.
Okay.
Rana Nabila.
Putri ya. Okay, good luck. Selamat ya, congratulations Ratna Nabila. Please.
No.
Yeah, the concentration.
I think it's the other.
I think it's
the other. Adelita. Yeah.
Adelita. Okay.
Adelita Dita. Okay.
Okay, Adelita. Congratulations for your answer, and then Professor Cheng has chosen you to win the prize, and please come to the Pak Wito to get a book from the Department of Physiology. Yeah. Okay. And Professor Cheng, on behalf of our department and on behalf of our Faculty of Medicine, we would like to say thank you so much for you, and we hope that you still want to share your knowledge, experience, and still want to connect it with us to make a collaboration. And I hope that we will meet again in the next session, and we will meet again in the next lecture. And thank you so much with our deep honorable. Thank you, Professor Cheng.
Thank you, Van.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Cheng.
Okay. We will send to you the certificate, Professor Cheng, later on.
Sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Terima kasih adik-adik ya, semua sudah semangat ya. Oke. Bye-bye.
Terima kasih, Dok.
Ya, terima kasih.
Pamit undur diri, Dok.
Ya.